live YouTube live stream show about what we can do to make America, the middle class, rebuild it once again and make this country a strong nation and a democratic nation. And a lot of things have been happening this week. In fact, since the election 2 weeks ago, President-elect Donald Trump has actually made some statements. He had an extensive interview with the New York Times just a couple of days ago, in which he came up with some things that surprised a few people. He did say that he was against reinstating torture in the fight against terror, and he's taking advice from General Mattis, who might actually become the next defense secretary. So it was very refreshing to hear Donald Trump say that he's against torture, because during the campaign that wasn't clear. Several other things. He has now come out, at least as of July, the Republican Party, the platform is instituted, according to Bloomberg News, has actually taken the platform plank of being for reinstating the Glass Steagall Act. The Glass Steagall Act, as a reminder, was implemented by Congress and the President, passed into law in 1933, during the heights of the Great Depression. And it lasted all the way until 1999, when President Bill Clinton and Senator Phil Gramm, Republican Senator Phil Gramm of Texas, and his wife, Professor Wendy Graham, was an economist, all supported the abolishing of Glass-Steagall. And this was a very momentous occasion, which really, I believe, ended up helping to cause the 2008 crash that we had to some extent. This repealing of Glass-Steagall was responsible to some extent for the tremendous crash and the ensuing Great Recession. Let's talk a bit about what that Glass-Steagall Act was. In 1932, when President Franklin Roosevelt was elected in 1932, and he took office in the beginning of 1933, he had to face the worst downturn in the economy, which we call the Great Depression, that America ever faced. And so this Great Depression hit us really hard and wide. And in fact, 25% official unemployment ensued. But unofficially, if you count the people that were underemployed, employed part-time, who were not on the working rolls of the workers, who were not on the employment rolls, you add those numbers up and get the real unemployment rate. It was actually closer to 40% real unemployment rate in 1933. So President Roosevelt had to do something very, very serious, and he brought in the New Deal. And as part of the New Deal reforms, he instituted a banking law, to regulate and separate banking from commercial banking to investment banking, to separate them from each other, in order to create a stabilized banking system by passing the Glass Steagall Act, or getting Congress to pass it. He signed it into law, he led on it. And now you see Donald Trump talking about reinstating Glass Steagall, which is certainly Bernie Sanders was the one pushing that in the primaries. And we didn't get a firm affirmation. In fact, Hillary Clinton actually did not say she would reinstate Glass Steagall. She preferred going with the Dodd-Frank reform that was brought in after the 2008 crash. Many people say that the Glass-Steagall would have been much stronger, that we should have brought that back. In fact, Senator Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders together wrote a 21st century Glass-Steagall Act that was to be implemented if Congress would pass it. And these two senators have been trying to get Congress to pass the 21st century Glass-Steagall Act, which would bring back Glass-Steagall. So now you have President-elect Trump, I believe, talking about bringing it back. He certainly, the Republican Party under him in the summer, adopted as part of his platform the reinstatement of Glass-Steagall. Let's talk a bit about what that does. In fact, when the banks crashed, the stock market crashed, the banks were taken off of the market for a while in order to regroup. President Roosevelt created banking holidays and then had to reopen the banks under a new system. The problem was in the 1920s that banks were acting very riskily in their behavior. Banks were not separated into commercial and investment banks. They were all banks that could do whatever they wanted. They could do risky investments, so they could lend out money commercially for homeowners. And these banks did not have a wall of separation between their commercial banking activity and their risky investment banking activity on Wall Street. So many banks were lending out money to Wall Street speculators. They themselves were allowing borrowers to put money in the stock market and to drive the stock prices up artificially in order to make more money. Quite often, dummy corporations were set up to go ahead and buy out more and more stock in order to drive up the stock value. And then, of course, that would drive up the profits. And pretty soon, the stock market became so overvalued that eventually it had to come down, and it ended up crashing, partly because of that, as well as the fact that demand was taken out of the economy as the middle class there was no middle class in the 1920s. In fact, there was rich and poor. So the consumers did not have enough money to buy the products that were needed to keep the economy going. On top of that, the fact that the banks acted very riskily with the money supply and with people's savings and their checking accounts caused the crash of the stock market and the crash of the banks, and the need to reinstate the banks on a different basis. So Glass-Steagall decided that law actually was decided to separate the two types of banking, to separate banking into two different spheres. One sphere would be commercial banking, which is the banking in which regular Americans who go home and earn a modest paycheck and come back with a check and put it in their checking account. Those banks would be called commercial banks. They would have millions of depositors who have small accounts, usually their paycheck accounts, in those banks on a weekly, monthly basis. And the government wanted to make sure that those commercial banks would be solvent. They were also allowed to lend out money in a conservative way for home loans, but with fixed rates generally, and with the home loans were insured. Actually, the banking accounts were insured of the people putting the money in the bank. Those accounts were insured by the federal government, by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC. At the same time, strict rules were put in place that commercial banks could not lend out money in risky ventures such as Wall Street or speculation in land or real estate. Wild speculation, that wasn't allowed. Just safe types of investments and loans were allowed, in the form of also holding people's checking accounts and savings accounts, the modest accounts that many millions of Americans had. In exchange, the government agreed to insure the accounts up to about $100,000, that if the bank does in fact in the end go bankrupt anyway, go out of business, the government guaranteed that those holders of the accounts in those banks would get reimbursed up to $100,000 of their money. That was one safety valve. The other part of it was to allow the commercial banks to invest in any kind of risky investment they wanted, because these were banks that held lots of big rich people's money, and lots of it, and that money was used to speculate on Wall Street, to speculate and to go out and play with futures and with all kinds of speculative instruments that would make them quick money and could also lose their money very quickly. It was a gambling casino, so to speak, or a gambling operation. And these very wealthy gamblers with their own money could go ahead and do it, said the government, as long as they would not merge with commercial banks, not interfere with commercial banks, not try to get money from commercial banks or lend money to them. There was a wall of separation established by Glass Steagall Act of 1933 between the commercial banking sector and this investment banking sector, which was far riskier and was mainly rich people's money. And the government also said the government of the United States would not insure these investment banks, unlike the accounts in the commercial banks, because the investment bankers were big boys. They were big guys and big people who had lots of money and could invest in Wall Street and play around and make quick profits, or lose money quickly and not get really hurt. So that was the arrangement under Glass-Steagall. For 66 years, the Glass-Steagall Act was in place. It worked very well. There were no Great Recessions. There was certainly no Great Depression. There might have been some mild recessions that were a natural downturn in the economy, and that comes in a cycle, and we always got over those mild recessions regularly with Glass-Steagall in place. But in the 1980s, the pressure was on to push Congress and the presidents to repeal the Glass-Steagall Act, and the pressure was put on by the banking and corporate sector on Wall Street primarily, who wanted to be able to merge with commercial banks, use some of their money to speculate wildly on Wall Street and on speculative investments such as real estate and those other kinds of unpredictable investments. And they wanted to use commercial banking money for that. Therefore, they wanted to be able to merge the investment banks with commercial banks. And so after lots of pressure for several years, finally, President Bill Clinton gave in, and he actually led, as a Democrat, the abolishing of Glass-Steagall, along with the Republican Congress and Republican Senator Phil Gramm, as well as his wife, Professor Wendy Graham. And there were many other people on both corporate Republicans and Democrats who supported the repeal of Glass-Steagall in 1999, the final repeal of it in 1999, under President Bill Clinton. And this was a total disaster. It was very dangerous because now banks could merge with each other and become huge in terms of size, and they could take all the extra money that they had through the commercial banks and then invest them in a risky way as the investment banks had been doing. But this time, there was no federal government to bail out the holders of those accounts, and the commercial banks could speculate with money that the small deposit holder held in his paycheck account. they could use that money to speculate by being part of the investment banking operation as well. So it was a merger between commercial banking, investment banking, and increased larger and larger sizes of fewer and fewer banks. Too big to fail became a very real concept. And that's exactly what happened with these banks. It became too big to fail, so to speak. So when it looked like the whole system was coming crashing down for many other reasons, which I, by the way, explain that in my book, Dollar Democracy, with Liberty and Justice for Some, How to Reclaim the American Dream for All. I explain in chapter 2, actually a chapter in there about the banking crisis and how this whole system came crashing down. And a big part of it also was the real estate industry that actually encouraged, and the Congress allowed them to come up with deregulation on loans, on home loans, and allow them to make risky loans and to pursue predatory lending of unsuspecting borrowers, who in the end ended up holding the bag when the bank would foreclose. Because what happened was, when these risky loans were made, then they were sold immediately to other banks, other financial institutions around the world. They were sold for a profit. And as they kept selling and selling to different institutions and making a profit, the loan that was an adjustable rate mortgage, which subprime lenders could use, ended up becoming a loan that was unfeasible, that people eventually, the subprime lenders, could not make their payments anymore. Either they lost their job, or the balloon part of the payment set and had to be paid off, or the mortgage rate set, it was an adjustable mortgage. And everyone who had these mortgages, many of them, could not afford to make payments. They stopped making payments, and guess who held the bag? The big banks. So you can see this two-pronged weakness of the system once Glass-Steagall was replaced. In speculative real estate, risky loan making, selling of loans that the big banks did after merging, and using the American people's money to do this all along. And once the system came crashing down in 2008, the Treasury Secretary, Mr. Paulson, came in, Henry Paulson, President George Bush's Treasury Secretary, went to Congress and begged them for money. They begged them for a lot of money, $767 billion. And that was so much money to bail out the banks that it was impossible to do so. And actually they did it. They bailed out the banks, took our taxpayer money. The banks received about 99% of the bailout funds, and the homeowners did not receive much money at all. They got about 1%. It looks like a call is coming in. Let's see who that might be, who wants to talk about these issues, so I can then go ahead and pick up the phone and make the phone call. So let's see who's calling right now, and we will see who would like to talk about the banking issue or any other issue. Okay, let's see. This is Peter Mathews, fighting for economic, social, and environmental justice. Who is this speaking, please?
This is Tony Castro in Orange County.
Tony, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing jolly like the Green Giant.
Good to hear from you again. You've called in a couple of times on the show before and really added some real substance to the discussion. So what's on your mind today? We were talking about Glass Steagall Act and how President-elect Trump is going to go ahead, or so the Republican Party says, they're going to try to reinstate the Glass Steagall Act, which was amazing to hear that because Bernie Sanders was pushing that earlier. But you have something else on your mind? You want to talk about banking and the home loan crisis and what happened in Glass Steagall?
Yeah. It sounds to me, because I heard you mention a lot of good things, and it sounds like these right-wing agendas that Trump is supporting. It's kind of bailouts for the super wealthy and help the super wealthy, and it's like kind of like almost like socialism only for the super wealthy. Only they get socialism. That's it. Nobody else.
Are you speaking of his tax plan particularly? Any particular plan that he has or platform that enshrines this idea, what you're saying? What is the proof that he's trying to bail out the super wealthy?
Well, what I was talking about was previous like big bank bailout.
Oh, you mean the bank bailout of 2009 put forth by George Bush and President Obama? Actually, 2008. It was 2008 under Bush, the bank bailout. Obama continued the bailout.
I was comparing Trump that he's no different. He's gonna allow this kind of behavior again, and that's kind of I was comparing that to kind of like socialism just for the 1% of the top income earners. So they say they don't believe in socialism, but they're going to take a big bank bailout, and that's kind of like socialism just for the rich, only for the rich, and for nobody else. as kind of
Yes, when the bailout, that's what it was back in 2008, but I'm not sure what you mean by Trump trying to bail out the banks because last we've read and seen in the Wall Street Journal is that Trump has said he wants to reinstate Glass Steagall to actually separate the commercial banks from the investment banks and bring back Glass Steagall to stabilize the banking system. But he does want to give tax cuts for the wealthy and the investor class, like the Reaganomics was doing years ago, and hoping that they will invest and grow our economy. That could be considered a type of socialism for the rich, yes. Is that going to help trickle down to all of us or not? What do you think? If he does that, and if the Congress goes along with
I
him.
think that Trump's definitely going to support. He's definitely going to support helping out the super wealthy. He's going to continue to let them have an influence on decision making, on political decisions that are going to directly affect my daily life. And I think that Trump is he's going to definitely just support more corporate tax loopholes, corporate tax welfare, and just really want to, just what's going on right now. It's just going to continue what's been going on for the last 16 years.
Okay.
Since, or longer that I can remember, and so it's just it looks like it's just gonna be the same, but maybe even worse. And
Yeah.
things are getting worse. And when I say things are getting worse, what I really mean is there seems to be more tax breaks for super wealthy income earners, and a small business owner like myself doesn't get treated exactly the same.
Right.
So I'm a computer scientist, and I have a digital media company, and small business owner.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just me right now in the business, but I know that small businesses are employing over 70% of the jobs in the United States.
Yes. About 70%.
That are getting rewarded. They're getting rewarded. It's not that they're being rewarded, but it's also that they're influencing. They're the ones running for Congress, and if not, they're the ones funding campaigns for people to run for Congress that share their interests and views.
You mean are you talking about the big businesses, Tony? Are you talking about the big businesses now?
Big business, yeah.
Okay.
Super wealthy.
Yes.
The big giants, corporate giants.
Yes, we have some numbers on that. We know that 80% of the funding in the presidential elections, including the congressional elections and the federal election year of the presidential race, 80% of the money comes from the top 1/2 of 1% of the economic elite in this country. The top 1/2 of 1% fund 80% of the campaigns.
We need a student loan bailout.
Yes.
I don't want to see another history. I don't want to see history repeating itself. We're going to have something again like the big bank bailout. What's going to be this time?
Right.
The biggest car owner or homeowner bailout or something. I don't know. It just seems ridiculous now. But I want to see something like the student loan bailout.
Okay, let's talk about that in a minute because that's something I've put forward as an official platform in the book that I wrote. I've added an extra point to it, the action plan, and that is complete forgiveness of student debt. Canceling the American student debt 100%. That's what we want President-elect Trump and the Congress to do. And that will really help the economy grow and flourish because the young people coming out of college will be able to start life without any debt. That means they can go out and spend money on buying a home and start a family earlier without a debt burden. You know what I'm saying?
I'm predicting with Trump in office for the next 8 years, I think we won't make it past 4. I mean, we can't do that again. But the next 4 years, I predict that taxes, we're going to have a regressive tax cap, and we're going to have the highest income earners end up paying the lowest amount of taxes in the income tax, that is, and the lowest income earners, like my business, a small business, micro business, is just me, one employee.
Right.
And so I'm the one that's going to end up paying the highest levels of tax, and so is the working middle class, and just pretty much anybody that's not the 1% of the super wealthy income earners are going to end up getting gouged. They got to look for money somewhere now. Now paying 10 cents for bags. And I don't see with Trump in office. I don't see a progressive tax cap coming on, or I can't see that he's going to go after where the real money is.
Okay, so you're seeing a regressive tax being implemented by the Donald Trump administration if the Republicans will go along with it, which means that the working poor, or at least the working middle class and the small business will be getting less of a tax cut than the biggest businesses and corporate owners. You right?
Yes,
Yes,
exactly.
I'm sure that's correct. The reason that he gives is that means the bigger businesses will invest and grow their businesses right here in America. But here's the problem. Most often, the big investors take and they invest on Wall Street, which takes our businesses and wants business to be taken overseas where there's cheaper labor markets. So the profit margin goes up and Wall Street can have even more value in their stocks. So that's not going to help. It's a trickle-down economic theory, my friend. Trickle-down economics.
It seems like
It doesn't trickle down.
What's going on in the government isn't really, they're not really doing their job. They need to be fired. Congress, Senate, and everybody up at the top. If you go to McDonald's and you order a Big Mac and you give them a salad, you're not doing your job. You're going to get fired. And right now, that's exactly what's going on in Congress.
Well, you had a chance to fire them. 2 weeks ago, you had a chance. Wait a minute.
I'm ordering a Big Mac right now from Congress.
Wait a minute. You had a chance 2 weeks ago to fire them. What happened?
And that's why what happened. I only registered for the during the Bernie, when Bernie was still running. I registered hundreds of people to vote.
Yes.
Hundreds.
Okay, you did.
And now, I mean, that was over, and now all I could do is influence as many people as I possibly can on social media and in person. But unfortunately, I think they're just barely waking up to politics, and that people say they don't want to vote. They don't want. I talk to people, they'd say, they tell me, Tony, if you talk about politics again, I'm going to stab you in your leg with this fork. And they don't want to hear about politics. Now they're starting to wake up. They say, hey, Tony, what do you think about this and that? But
well, that's encouraging, isn't it? Isn't that because of all the hard work you did and other people like you did?
And definitely, a lot of people put in a lot of good work. But what we got to do now is encourage progressive people like ourselves to run in their own districts, within their own districts. And apparently, with somebody like Trump in office, apparently you don't even need a political background. You just need to be like 25 years old and an American citizen, or you don't even have to be born in the United States to be a congressperson.
Right.
You just have to be like 25 years old and a citizen. And so we gotta let people know that they are qualified. Just obviously you don't need a background in any type of, because I don't think Trump has held any kind of office before.
Let me ask you, Tony. Okay, I understand what you're saying. All of us know Trump just came out of the dang casino business, a real estate business. He's not an office holder. So here's the point. Question for you. Are you familiar with what Trump's interview in the New York Times just 2 days ago, as the BBC reported and the New York Times reported? Do you know have you been following what he's been saying? And what you say is one thing, and what you do is something else sometimes, right? But have you? Wait a minute. Let me finish my question, Tony. Hang on a second. Can I finish my question, please, buddy?
Yeah.
Let me finish my question. Have you been following his change on specific issues that he's saying in his words, and actually saying? First example, he's come out and said he condemns white nationalists, he condemns the racists and the alt-right. He says he doesn't have anything to do with them. He said, I don't have any relationship with them. They're wrong. He also says he's going to reinstate Glass Steagall. And he said, for example, that he wants to create a massive infrastructure program for jobs, rebuilding our roads, bridges, highways, new systems, water systems, sewer systems. He says he's going to massively invest trillions of dollars in this. Now, can he get Congress to vote for the money? So we got to look at what he's proposing. And is he going to carry out his promises or try to carry them out?
And here, just like with his wall, he promised all this stuff, but where's the money going to come from?
No, he's not going to build it. He's not going to build it. I predict that ahead of time. He's saying he's not building the wall. He's not going to try to deport 11 million undocumented people. He's going to start with those who have a criminal record, and that's it. Then worry about. He said, "I'm going to focus on jobs. I'm not going to go after Hillary Clinton. I'm not going to have the Justice Department investigator for any possible malfeasance committed, like he said he was going to put her. Remember, he said, I'm not doing any of that. I'm going to focus on the economy and on getting people back to work. And he says he welcomes everyone in America of all ethnicities and race and religion. Now, can you believe someone like that after what he said in the campaigns? That's what I want to ask from you. Okay.
Much more knowledgeable of what and actually most of what I heard from you, because when right now he's so unpopular. Trump is so unpopular.
Actually, I hate to tell you this. He's actually gained about 15 to 20 points in popularity. He was down at 32% approval rating. He's gone up to 46% since he was elected in legitimate polling. I mean, this came out of major polling source. He still has a low. It's not. Go ahead.
When it comes to Trump, I'm just, I've been switching the channel and I'm just sick of it, and I already know what's going to happen, and that means that people like me are not going to benefit, and so you're asking me about that, and been kind of just not following it because it's just he's so unpopular to me that I just kind of been predicting what's going on, and I'm not even paying attention anymore.
Okay.
Because I know what's going to happen is we're not going to get higher paying jobs. We're not going to get health care that we need. We're not going to get an affordable education like we used to have, the educational system, higher education, and the important things that we need like.
How about student debt forgiveness completely?
Exactly.
Well, let's start. Wait a minute. Let's start making some demands on him and the Congress and see what they say then. Because don't forget, he didn't win the majority of the popular vote, did he? Hillary Clinton got 2 million more popular votes than he did. Am I right?
Yep, that's true.
So we should not. In my view, I'm sorry, Tony, I may have to disagree with you on this one. I don't think it's time to hide our heads in the sand and ignore Trump. It is time now to take the offensive, to make sure these alt-right, white racist nationalists do not go on the warpath against the rest of America. Put them in their place. Tell Trump he's on notice that he has to cut off any kind of possible connection to them, which he's already done now, verbally, in a national interview on the New York Times. He has said, he is terribly, he says, there's no way that I accept these people in any way. I'm condemning them in their actions. And he named it. He named the groups. So when he says that, now we got to hold him to his word. You know what I'm saying? When he says he's going to invest in infrastructural jobs, like creating new technology, which could include, by the way, electric trains. China just built 20,000 miles of high-speed rail, Tony, where the trains go 200 miles per hour, connecting every large Chinese city. In 7 years, they did it. No, this is not maglev. This is no. Maglev is a German and Japanese train that goes 350 miles per hour. It's magnetic levitation. This is pure electric trains. They're called high-speed rail at 200 miles per hour, connecting every major city in China, 20,000 miles of track, laid down in 7 years, Tony, less than 7 years. The Chinese government pushed it through and created jobs. Now, Trump is talking about infrastructure like this. Let's put him to work. Let's make him do what he says he's going to do. Yes, go ahead.
What I want to see is, I want to see the United States, America. Trump talks about how America is not great and we have to, let's make America great again.
That was the slogan of the campaign, right?
He says, so he's directly saying that America is not great. I disagree with him completely, but he says that let's make America great again. If you ask me, in my opinion, hey, what do you think that means? Let's make America great again. I want to see America have an educated workforce and be competitive in the global economy.
There you go.
And I don't want to have to feel sorry for our futures. It just doesn't have. We used to have free education in California, and now it's almost. The tuition is skyrocketing. It's going up faster than it's not even keeping up.
Did you hear the latest, Tony? Did you hear the latest on tuitions? Did you hear the latest proposal in California?
I know it's going up higher than inflation is.
This is a much bigger increase. They just decided to raise. The legislature is proposing going up to by $250 or so at Cal State and UC in the fall.
Yeah, and it's not going to stop there.
No, it hasn't. It's never stopped. It always keeps going up.
That's not the beginning. It's just getting worse worse and worse because people are starting to wake up now. But I think that we need to definitely have a more educated workforce and become competitive in the global economy.
Yes.
And introduce. I mean, there's just so, especially now with internet and technology, the direction it's going, and we just have so much potential. We're just throwing it away.
You're right, my friend. You're right, especially as India and China are coming up and leapfrogging over us in some of these new projects.
Oh, yeah.
And new technology and new education for the young people. I mean, China graduates more engineers in 1 year than we have half our population. So we got a long ways to go. And let me ask you this. Is there any chance that someone like a Donald Trump could lead on this if we push him to do it? Or not?
I think that...
or the Congress?
I think that Trump just has a pen and a signature and doesn't understand a dang thing that's going on and just signing away, trying to be... I think he has in his own mind something else is going on. I believe that he's racist, and he has this other thing going on in his mind, but really what's happening is Congress has their own agenda, and they just need some guy like him so mindless and just willing to just at kind of like impulse just do whatever they say. And he's definitely, I mean, I want to ask Trump something and say, who's your daddy? You know, it's Congress. Congress is his daddy. And he's just, I don't believe he even knows what's going on. I think he's naive. I think he just, America, or these electoral votes they will.
Well, Tony, what I would suggest, first of all, you could probably do is to open up the newspaper or go to your news feed and just check out the Guardian, the articles from BBC and some of the more credible sources such as the Wall Street Journal, and notice what Trump has said in the interviews, because this is becoming worldwide. This is worldwide news and national news. He can't just sit there and make a fool of himself by lying outright. I think that there's a chance he's going to try to carry these things out because he sees the people. He saw people out in the streets protesting what he initially, in his campaign initially, was proposing. They were out there protesting those things. He saw the power of masses of young people. You saw people writing and making statements about the need to rebuild our economy and get jobs back and in the right way and education. So now he's willing to. Do you know what else, Tony? Here's something else he backtracked on. Global warming, my friend. Do you remember he was a climate change denier during the campaign?
I like what you said. I like what you said previously on a different show. You said climate disruption. Climate
disruption. There you go. So what do you think Trump has come out with now on climate change? Do you know what? Or climate disruption. Do you know what he said to the New York Times? He says, I do believe there is global warming going on. It is happening, and I think it possibly and probably could be caused by human beings. Now that's like that's an about-face turn. I mean, it's completely the opposite of what he said during the campaign, Tony.
Yeah.
So what is that all about?
Probably, yeah. That just shows how naive he
is. Is he naive, or is he a very astute, what do you want to call him? Someone who can get elected by saying the right things, and then he might change in order to keep his popularity. And if the people push him, maybe he'll go forward with it. I think you should read that interview and see whether you think it's credible or not. I know it's easy to not.
That's the prize-winning talent that comes out of Trump University.
What happened there? What happened? He backtracked on that too, didn't he? Tony, did he backtrack on that or not?
Doesn't he have like 500 businesses around the world right now?
Oh, he's got hundreds of businesses around the world. That could pose a conflict of interest unless he sets it up in a blind trust. That's a good point. But wait a minute, look, you're going very fast here. You mentioned Trump University. What happened there? Do you remember what happened?
Please tell me what happened.
Well, Trump University, he was accused of fraud, of defrauding students, right? Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
They took him to court, right? In Judge Carrillo's court. What do you think he decided to do just recently, which he said he wouldn't do during the campaign? He said, I'm not settling this case. I'm going to go all the way through and prove that I'm innocent. You know what he did just a week ago, not even a couple days ago? He settled the case for $25 million, Tony. And the reason he gave, he said, I don't have time to deal with this. I got to be president. I got things to do for America. He settled a $25 million settlement. So, Tony, I'm just trying to say that, maybe you and I and other people should keep a little bit more open mind, and maybe not more than open mind. We should actually take our power to the streets and demonstrate peacefully, agitate, direct democracy. Let the president-elect know that we're in the driver's seat, that he's working for us, that we will support him where he does the right thing, and we'll oppose him 100% where he does the wrong thing. And that's what Bernie Sanders is taking the same position on that. Bernie Sanders said, when Trump comes up with infrastructural jobs and he talks about keeping jobs from going over to China and India and Mexico without making sure there's fair trade, we'll support him. When he talks about other things where he starts rubbing shoulders with racists or white supremacists, we're going to condemn that. So we have to be very wise as serpents and harmless as doves, as the Bible says. Wise as serpents and harmless as doves, which means we got to be able to do this, my friend. We got to get on. First of all, you got to stay informed. You got to read this stuff about what's going on, or at least.
You got to take it's direct democracy.
There you go. There you go.
Initiative. Find out how to write an initiative.
Yes.
And get whatever you got to do. Get the signatures or pay the $1,000 or whatever you got to do, and write an initiative. Hold a special election. Citizens can do that, and it's direct democracy. You don't have to be a lawyer. You don't have to be some politician. You can citizens can write an initiative, and people can vote on it in a special election, and that's direct democracy. And Trump's a businessman. I don't think a businessman would make a good president, because he's just trying to now think about profit or how he can benefit his own. He's been unethical. He practices unethical business practices. I heard something about his wife said she doesn't want to go to the White House because of the downgrade. She's insulting America, and she'd rather stay in one of
Well, I didn't hear that quote, but I'd like to see that. I certainly would love to see it. But here's the thing too about that. You're saying all these negative things about him, and a lot of it's true, as what we've seen in the campaign and who he was. But are people capable of changing? Possibly. I know a lot of people are skeptical that this man is not for real. He goes back and forth on different issues. But is it possible that let me just give you an example. Is it possible a Robert Byrd, who is a member of the KKK, have you heard of Senator Robert Byrd, my friend?
Yes.
Of West Virginia? He was a member of the KKK as a young man. He was in politics while he was affiliating with those racist groups, and he even was a segregationist. That man, later on in life, became a total progressive. He literally genuinely changed. He basically asked for forgiveness for everything, and he carried the Constitution in his pocket. He voted all the progressive issues for progressive populist policies of social justice and all ethnicities. Robert Byrd changed like that. Now, I'm not saying that Trump's going to change. I'm just saying, how about the rest of us stay on top of him to make sure that he could go in that direction, and not just him, but what about Congress, Tony? What about Congress?
Instead of negative campaigning, or it's not even campaigning anymore. Instead of we should try to now that he's our president-elect, now it's time for us to have influence and direct him, because the people will have to lead for the leaders to lead. They'll follow.
I love it. You've just paraphrased Mahatma Gandhi, who said, "If the people lead, the leaders will follow. If the people lead, the leaders will follow." I love it, Tony. You brought that up. Yes. That's what we got to do now. We got to lead, because we have a leader that might follow us.
And I like that, because
in some ways.
Everybody else is kind of out of idea. It's kind of that's a bold idea. You're bold. That was bold. But everybody else is saying they're kind of confused, like just hold demonstrations and ask people why, and they're not even sure why. They're just angry for different reasons and kind of deceptively confusing them. But
you're right, Tony.
What you're saying is that we need to lead. We need to lead, and instead of doing it in a negative way, we need to do it in a positive way.
Yes, and a very firm way. We're not just begging the president-elect to do these things. We're going to tell him, you promised some of these things, plus we want you to even do more. And you take the Bernie Sanders platform and you tell Trump, this is what the people want, and you want half of it or part of it. Now get the rest of it, and we're going to make sure you do this and get Congress to do it, and we'll support you on this. As long as you make sure, Mr. Trump, that you cut your tie, any kind of possible, you don't overlook the white nationalists that have supported you. I mentioned the National Policy Institute, led by Richard Spencer, a white nationalist group. They were out there having a convention in Washington, D.C. the other day. A convention, a nationwide convention, which they were putting on signs of Heil Hitler, Heil Trump, they said, Heil Victory. Heil Victory. Emulating Hitler, the Nazi people. So Trump is condemned. He's condemning those things verbally. Let's see if he will actually stick to it and go with the people of America and go with the real American that he says he is, where he cares about us and doesn't want to let these white nationalists, supremacists, and nationalists try to intimidate everyone. There's no way we're going to take that from them, Tony, and you know that. We cannot hide our heads in the sand. We got to have a clear path, my friend, That's kind of what I'm trying to lay out here, and I think you're pretty much on the same page. But it is very well, Tony. I must say, I do want to consider what you said about the demoralization of many people on the progressive side who feel that Trump's election was a total disaster for all of us in the country. Many people feel that they're confused, they're demoralized, they're scared. People who are
people definitely are awake now to the electoral college. A lot of people.
yes,
That
that's right.
For decades, I've been trying to, for at least over a decade and a half, I've been telling the same people, and now they're the same information that I've been giving them. Now it's like they never heard me or something, and now they're telling me, hey, Tony, you know what the electoral college is, and they're teaching me. Like, oh really? I just pretend like I don't know. Like, oh yeah, please.
Do you remember, Tony? I wrote an amendment to abolish the electoral college and let the voters choose the president directly.
Yes.
I wrote that in 2008, my friend. I took it out of my file cabinet. I resurrected it, and we got it out there again. And now it's, believe me, yesterday at the meeting, at the town hall meeting at Cypress College, which we had on the post-election trauma and what's going on, how to get people together and overcome the fear. We had this great town hall meeting, lasted 2 hours. Over 100 people were there. A lot of students, faculty, and the administration were there. I was a panelist. At that place, I put out that, we handed out that electoral college reform, that abolishing the electoral college was undemocratic. It doesn't allow the people to choose.
I remember you also wrote an initiative for a special election for the severance fee on oil.
Oil severance tax for education, right? But I'd like to focus more on the electoral college right now because we don't want to get off the track here on the oil severance tax at this point, if you don't mind. This is very important about the electoral college, Tony. We got a chance now to abolish it based on the fact that it's happened too many times. The fifth time in our history now where the candidate that won the popular vote lost the election because the electoral college stopped them. It happened with Al Gore. It happened with Hillary Clinton. It happened with Rutherford B. Hayes in the 1870s. It happened with John Quincy Adams and once before that. And this is completely un-American, undemocratic. I believe we should abolish the college. One person, one vote, my friend. One person, one vote, and we can do it. And by the way, we should get that initiative to a member of Congress or the Senate to sponsor it right now. Right now. 2/3 vote to put it forth to the states to do it and adopt it. What do you think?
And that's a great idea. And we need to let people know that they can influence their Congress members and local politicians. They maybe even as little as giving them a call or writing them a letter every day.
Yes. How about specifically going to their office and saying, here's an amendment written, modeled on the 17th Amendment that created the direct election of U.S. senators. We modeled it on that, and we're calling for the direct election of the U.S. president. Here it is. It's legally sound. Mr. Congressperson, Miss Congressperson, take it and run, or we're going to be there.
And I would like to remind everybody that's listening, I would like to remind that your congressperson does have a local office.
Yes. That's right, in your district.
You don't have to travel to Washington, D.C.
So should we give out the phone number, Tony, for them to find out where these offices are? I can give out a couple of numbers.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Okay, great idea you brought that up. Good job bringing it up, Tony. Here we go. For the Los Angeles County residents, the LA County Registrar of Voters phone number is area code 562-466-1310. 562-466-1310. And the website is lavote.net. lavote.net. In the Orange County side, for those residing in Orange County, the phone number is area code 714-567-7600. 714-567-7600. And the website is ocvote.net. ocvote.net. They can go right there and find out exactly who their member of Congress is and where his office is in their district, close to their home. And let's start a movement to get these members of Congress to abolish the Electoral College, among other things. We should have also the 13-point, 14-point demand that we have.
The information you just shared with us is very empowering information. It's like an arsenal of information. And
there you go.
It's like a way to fight back with knowledge and education and still be reasonable.
Right, and certainly the people across the country can go to their local registrar of voters offices or the Secretary of State's office, contact your state Secretary of State, and ask them who is your member of Congress in that local district. Or you can go to contactingcongress.org. I think that's the website. Contactyourcongressperson.org or contactingcongress.org. You'll have to Google it. but there's a central website to get all of the names and phone numbers of the members of Congress throughout the United States with their contacts. And let's get the people of America to get this movement going to abolish the Electoral College and to bring in the other reforms you're talking about, Tony, canceling student debt, tuition-free education, taxing the super wealthy a little bit more so they can bring in money for schools and for roads and bridges and jobs, closing corporate loopholes, fighting global warming by moving to alternative energy. We've got a 14-point plan in my book, Tony, in Dollar Democracy, a 14-point plan. People can go there and look at, and every congressman's number is in my book too. Every member of Congress's number is in my book. Their phone number, direct line to Washington, D.C. office.
Sure is, yeah. And contributions to where they got the money from.
Oh, yes.
How much.
OpenSecrets.org. There you go. Let's put that out there, Tony. OpenSecrets.org. Great resource that shows you where the money is coming from and where it's going to which members of Congress and who's influencing them and how they might be voting.
How about CTJ.org? I haven't used that for a decade.
Oh, yeah. Citizens for Tax Justice. CTJ.org is still operating. Nonprofit, nonpartisan think tank that gives you all of the corporate loopholes and the tax malfeasance where the rich get all kinds of breaks. American working middle class gets very little. And the CTJ.org comes out with proposals to Congress to reform the tax code to make it more just and fair. CTJ.org, Tony. Thanks for reminding us. Anything else I'd like to talk about before we sign off? Because we may have some other people calling in here in a few minutes.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Awesome.
Anything
else?
Other people give their opinion as well.
And it's great to talk to you and hear from you again. You bet, my friend. We'll talk again soon. Thanks for calling again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
There you are, folks. You heard it from Tony Castro from, I believe, Santa Ana. And he had something very important, many things important to say, what concerns him and regarding the country and what concerns his friends and associates and families about this new presidency, the President-elect Donald Trump. There's a lot of fear and trepidation out there, but I think it's time now to put that behind us. As President Roosevelt said, we have nothing to fear but fear itself. We have nothing to fear but fear itself. It is time that we go forward and we show the elected leaders that we are the leaders of the country. The American people are the sovereignty of the land. We have a thing in political science, a concept called popular sovereignty. That's what part of our political philosophy is about in this country, what our country's constitution is based on. Popular sovereignty, which means the people, that's the word popular. Sovereignty means ultimate and supreme power. The supreme power belongs with the people. The ultimate power is in the hands of the people. We give the government power and our elected officials power to pass laws and make policy that would benefit all of us, the public interest, not just a few special interests. So we tell them, it doesn't matter where you get your money from for your campaigns, you need to serve us most of the time, if not all the time, and stop serving the special interests that sponsor you most of the time. That's what we're talking about here. Tony Castro mentioned that in his discussion. Anyone else like to call, please call in at area code 562-234-3319. 562-234-3319. Call's coming in. Let's see who this is. Good evening, sir. This is Peter Mathews, working for social, economic, and environmental justice. Who would like to speak up here? What's the topic? What's the name, please?
Yeah, this is Alan Covey.
Alan Covey. Good to hear from you, sir. How are you?
I'm just fine.
Okay.
I've been participating in an interesting conversation regarding Glass Steagall and Dodd-Frank.
Yes.
And could you tell me what the difference is between Dodd-Frank and Glass Steagall?
Well, Glass Steagall was the original act that was in place for 66 years, though it completely separated the commercial banking from investment banking, which meant it kept American small policyholders, people with paychecks going in their checking account, very safe, because the government said, as I explained earlier on the show, that the commercial banks could not engage in wild speculation. They could not invest money into stocks on Wall Street. They could not lend money out for stock investors. They couldn't buy real estate and speculate on the prices going up. Commercial banks had to be very conservative and only make a conservative home loans, such as 30-year interest rate loans. They could do things like pay interest out to people with savings accounts. And the government would protect that money of the American people by insuring those commercial banks up to $100,000 per account. In case the commercial bank had to shut down or went bankrupt anyway, they would be the American people would be protected, and their particular accounts would be protected up to $100,000 the government would pay them. The investment banks, which were separated from the commercial banks under Glass Steagall in 1933 and lasted until 1999, by the way, 66 years, The investment banks were allowed to do whatever they wanted with their money, basically. They're very wealthy people who had wealthy investments in their investment banks that could speculate on Wall Street with their money. They could go out and buy real estate and futures contracts, all kinds of things where they speculate and can gamble big and make lots of money quickly and also lose their money quickly. The government said, you rich guys want to play with your money, go ahead. But we're not going to insure you. We're not creating FDIC for you. You're on your own. And you cannot engage in activity that only the commercial banks can engage in. So the government set strict rules separating the two banking aspects or systems and did it for a purpose. And during that 66 years, Brett, Alan, during those 66 years, we had no Great Recession. We had no Great Depression. We just had a few mild recessions here and there, which were cyclical, and they go away after a while. So that was because we separated the two types of banking. Now, Dodd-Frank was an attempt to bring back some semblance of regulation after Wall Street crashed in 2008. The Dodd-Frank reform was brought in, I think, in 2009 or so by the Obama administration mainly, and the people that wrote the re-regulations, which were not that strong a regulation. Dodd-Frank did not separate the two sets of banking systems, did not do things that Glass Steagall used to do. So Dodd-Frank is a basically ineffective bill that doesn't really do what it should. And that's why corporate-backed politicians support Dodd-Frank, but those who are more independent, those who believe in working for the American people and saving our banking system, especially commercial banking for the American people, such as Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, those are the folks that say we have to reinstate Glass Steagall. And they've actually offered a 21st century Glass Steagall. That's a bill that both Sanders and Warren are co-sponsoring in the Senate. All the members of Congress jump aboard immediately. And what's interesting is Donald Trump and the Republican Party under him in their platform this summer, from what I read in the Wall Street Journal report in July, I believe, said that they are supporting a reinstatement of Glass Steagall. Isn't that amazing? That Trump and the Republican Party would support that, but many of the corporate Democrats didn't support it. Now, what is that all about? I mean, this is an upside-down politics, topsy-turvy. We'll take it any way you can. We'll take it from a Republican or Democrat if it'll save the American banking system and preserve it for the American people, not just for big speculators on Wall Street and the big banks. That's what I say about it, Brett. I kind of try to explain it to you. Any things?
Well, Henry, that's a lot to take in. I got to go back to some of your recordings. But I've known you for a while.
Yes.
So I'm actually your friend.
Yes, we are.
I think. And I've done a lot of studying on Glass Steagall. I've seen the bill. It's very short and sweet, and it just basically says, thou shalt not take advantage of thy public. And I mean in very short terms and more legalese. But Dodd-Frank is very complicated, but it included something called the Volcker Rule, if you remember. And I think they threw that Volcker Rule out. It was supposed to be temporary, but I think they voted on it to make it permanent. I don't know.
There was some influence by lobbyists against the stricter reform of Dodd-Frank, and it became more lax. And that's the problem. We need to just completely get rid of Dodd-Frank and bring back a 21st century Glass Steagall Act with the basic fundamentals of the 20th century Glass Steagall Act back in 1933, which worked so well. That's what I think.
Yeah, and I think simpler is better, too.
Yes, it's also simpler and more direct and clearer. That's what we need, is transparency, Brett, and simplicity. Even in our tax code, the tax code should be reformed. We should close all these hundreds of corporate loopholes and other loopholes for wealthy people, and maybe lower the corporate tax rate a little bit, because it is 35%, I believe, which is the highest rate in the Western industrial world. But corporations don't pay it, especially the big guys. The smaller corporations pay it. The big businesses don't pay that because they have all kinds of loopholes written into the law for them by members of Congress that they sponsored during campaigns and elections and lobbying. So this is a problem. We need to simplify the tax code by reducing the corporate tax rate maybe down to 25% rather than 35%, and close the corporate tax loopholes that would bring in more funds from the corporate sector fairly and made a more even playing field for competition. And that would create money for investment, as President-elect Donald Trump wants to do, in infrastructure. I think that we should also have supporting of small business with some of that money. Lend out the money to small business at very, very low interest rates to help entrepreneurs get started with all kinds of new technology business that they have going right now. Encourage the entrepreneurship of America. especially startup businesses. That we could do if we did the right thing.
Yeah, and something like a new deal.
Oh, we got another call coming in. A new deal. That would be fantastic.
I'll let you go. You've got another caller.
Okay, let's talk to this new caller. But I love talking to you some more. We're almost out of time, but we'll catch on the next week. Thank you so much, Brett, for calling in. Okay, looks like there's a call coming in, folks. I'm trying to operate it here. Hello? Let me just dial that number back and see if we can get them. Thank you for bearing with me, audience. Appreciate it. We've only got a couple more minutes left here for the hour broadcast. Let's see who this caller is. Well, it's ringing. Let's see if they pick it up. If they don't, we'll have to just basically sign off since it's all a little bit after 8 o'clock. But let's see. We'll find out in just a second. It's great to be here with you, though, discussing these very important issues of the day and of the week and the year. Hello? Yes, who's calling, please? Oh, is this Professor Mark Rossler?
Yes, it is your mailbox.
All right.
I left some sort of a messaging thing for
you. I'm glad I called back here and dialed you now. This is Professor, I know this gentleman calling, Professor Mark Rossler, who teaches political science. Tell the audience what you teach, Mark, please.
What's that?
Tell the audience what you teach and where you teach.
Tonight I was teaching international relations.
International relations? At which college?
That's correct. I was at Orange Coast College, and I swear to God, I was the only professor on campus. It seems that the rest of them have taken an extra long weekend.
Yes. And early Thanksgiving. They're giving a lot of thanks early, aren't they?
I had plenty of free parking, yes.
Very interesting. Well, speaking of international relations, we're talking tonight, and we're almost done with the show, actually, but I'm so glad you called. We're talking about President-elect Donald Trump and some of his proposals here on the domestic front, primarily so far, to bring back Glass Steagall. But what do you see on the international front? Is there any possibility, or is it difficult to predict what he might do? Go ahead. Do you have the floor?
Well, I don't know. It seems to me that they announced his appointment to the United States ambassador to the UN, and that's the...
That was the former governor or the present governor of South Carolina, Nikki Haley, right?
Nikki Haley. Yeah, Nikki Haley is her name. She has absolutely no experience.
No experience in foreign policy, but let's see what happens.
Correct,
yeah. So.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I've been lecturing on the United Nations in my international relations class, and I told my students that, we're not even finished with this section on UN yet, but even now you have more knowledge of the United Nations than Mr. Trump's nominee to fill the position of U.S. ambassador to the UN. So you know more than she does.
Well, perhaps we should have Governor Nikki Haley take a little early Christmas vacation and come into your class over here, your international relations class, and take it for a couple of weeks. That may not be enough time, but you're right. Governors generally don't have any experience in foreign policy.
No, do not. Yeah, and Sarah Palin was proof of that a few years back, where she indicated just exactly the extent of her lack of knowledge. But good entertainment, and maybe there's a constituency out there that he's trying to please. But
well, let's hope that Nikki Haley is a quick study and can get some real coaching here. In the IRS field and what's going on in the world today. This is a precarious time, isn't it, Mark? And a challenging time.
Well, it certainly is. It certainly is in this election.
So what are some of the major challenges here in the world right now? What are the hot spots, one or two of them that you could speak of in foreign policy?
Well, the situation in Syria, continues to be ongoing and developing, and it's a situation that doesn't see itself being resolved anytime soon. The United States seems to be at odds. We're opposed to the continuation of Bashar al-Assad's regime in Syria. So is ISIS. So interestingly enough, that puts us on the same side as ISIS.
Isn't that interesting?
War in Syria. So
yes,
it's quite complicated. Yeah.
Yes. Do you think that President-elect Trump might be able to work better with Russia in the Syrian theater and especially to fight ISIS? What do you think?
I think Mr. Putin is going to work very well with Donald Trump. I don't think it's going to be the other way around.
Interesting. That's interesting. Yeah, so that should be interesting to see if there's a change there and any movement. What's another spot in the world before we sign off for tonight? Another area of international foreign policy that you'd like to discuss for a minute.
Well, I don't know. The situation with China, seems to be rather, tenuous. The
Mm-hmm.
trade imbalance and so forth, and all the talk about the U.S. jobs being exported to China. Well, the fact of the matter is that these are jobs that Americans really aren't interested in doing, nor is it cost effective for American businesses to bring the jobs back home, because then all of a sudden your Apple iPhone goes from $800 up to $1,500 because they're having to pay American wage labor. And so, for the sake of business, things are changing. There's no question about it. And the manufacturing jobs, are being phased out. Since the 1980s, we've been talking about a post-industrial era with service sector type jobs of the
Right.
sunrise industries, and green industries. Technology supporting green, environmental friendly source of energy. And
Could we start moving in that direction and to replace some of these jobs we've lost toward alternative energy and Green New Deal?
that would be a good direction to take, I think.
Would that take some government coordination, or can that be left up to the private sector entirely?
No, that's going to take government coordination, stimulation, and a little bit of arm twisting to get some of these industries to retool and begin to compete with the Germans, the Chinese,
Right.
and others.
Right. So in other words, Donald Trump's campaign was run on the basis of stopping our jobs from going to China and Mexico, but he didn't talk too much about how to invent new jobs here, to invent new technologies here, right?
Yeah. It was all heat but no light.
So we've got to make sure we do some enlightening here, and I think that it's very. Did you read the New York Times interview with him, by the way, just 2 days ago?
No, I did not. No,
It's quite amazing. I'd like advocate you go and read it, because he's actually reversed several of his key positions. He actually even acknowledged that global warming is probably human-made. He said that actually it exists. He finally acknowledged that it exists. It's not a Chinese government plot, like he said in the campaign, and that it's probably man-made. He said that, and he wants clean air and clean water. It's several things, which were amazing that he said these complete reversals. You see some of the things that he said regarding policies that he campaigned on.
And that's probably not surprising, because once the campaign is over, all that rhetoric and hyperbole that he was so famous for is now being adjusted to the real world.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, the real situation.
The real situation. Right,
he said
right.
What the audience wanted to hear.
At that time.
That's how he got elected.
Yeah, he got himself elected that way in the primaries, and even then finally, remarkably, in the general election. And now it's time to rule or govern. It's time to govern. He's taking a different tack. By the way, he did condemn anyone who is involved or promoting white supremacy or the alt-right movement. He said, that's a despicable movement. I'm paraphrasing. I do not support them. I have no connections with them, and I'm condemning them for what they're doing.
They prefer to be referred to as alt-right. I prefer to call them as they are, and they're neo-Nazis. There's no question about
There's certainly a big element of that in there, and so
they prefer the alt-right designation, but I'm not going to give them what they want.
Yes. We saw them. We saw that convention that was held by 275 of them in the Ronald Reagan Federal Building just a couple of days ago. Do you hear about that convention?
Yeah, the shadow of the White House. Yeah.
In the shadow of the White House, and the things they called for were amazingly unbelievable. So it's good to hear. And I actually challenged the president-elect in my broadcast, and maybe even on another forum, public forum. I said, President-elect Trump, you need to make a speech. I did it yesterday at the Cypress College Town Hall Forum, by the way. I said, President Trump, you've got to make a speech immediately, even before the Electoral College vote, telling the American people that this country belongs to all of us, and that these so-called alt-right or neo-Nazi people who are saying they support you, that you have nothing to do with them, that you condemn what they're saying, and that you want to be inclusive of this country, we all are, and to make a greater country that way. So you need to come out and make a speech.
He can do that very easily, because he's already got their vote.
He's got absolutely.
Now he doesn't have to suck up to them or any other group.
That is so true. So perhaps some of our suggestions have been heeded. Let's see. That statement is very remarkable. You've got to read the New York Times interview of a day or two ago. Even the BBC News carried it because they were so impressed by what he said.
I'd be happy to check it out.
So the real question is, how sincere is he? We know actions speak louder than words, but we've got to give someone a chance when they are bold enough to speak in that way. We'll see.
Yeah, that's true. But with Bannon and others in his corner as advisors and so forth,
That's true.
I don't like the imprint that this is going to leave.
Right,
So I don't
especially
know, maybe
the.
he'll act independently enough so that he can, pursue some of the common ground that he had with Bernie Sanders, for instance.
There you
That will
go.
be a
There
big
you go.
in my view. But
Yes. But he needs to be clear about someone like Bannon. You know, what is Bannon doing in the White House? This guy comes from Breitbart News, which Bannon himself called the platform for the alt-right. He called it just a couple of years ago. So we need to know what the heck's going on there with that type of advisor in the White House. A top advisor, right?
Yeah, top advisor,
strategist and senior advisor. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if Ailes is going to have any position in his administration, but
who is that? I'm sorry, Mark. Who are you talking about?
Roger Ailes.
Oh, Roger Ailes. Yeah, the Fox News guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Boy, that would be something else. That would be tragedy right there, and something we wouldn't want. What about this other? What about the Attorney General nominee, Jeff Sessions? What do you think about him? What's his track record?
He's pretty ultra-conservative. There's no question about that, and he would definitely be cut from the similar bolt of cloth as John Ashcroft was, and
right.
They will pursue a very conservative social agenda. There's no question about that. Yeah.
Yes, they do, and that's also of concern to us. Those of us who are progressive, and those of us in the middle of the road who want to have a modern America that would progress forward. It's very concerning to have someone like a Jeff Sessions, who, by the way, at one time called the NAACP un-American. I'm quoting him. He labeled them un-American.
Yeah.
And he also said, oh my God. He said that, anyway, let's leave it at that. He got a couple more comments of his that are quite controversial. We should document it before we put it out there. But thank you so much, my friend. Thank you for calling. And we will have you back on again next Wednesday. It's every Wednesday, folks. We're about to sign off here. Let's say goodnight to Professor Mark Rossler, and we thank him for his input here and his addition to the show tonight. Good night, Mark.
Keep up the good work, Peter.
Thank you.
Much.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
So, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to say goodnight to everyone out there and keep vigilant. Certainly do not give up and keep not only hope alive, but let's act on our hope. Let's be proactive in our political engagement and our involvement, and we can go forward and build this country and keep it where it is and make it even better. So we can do this, and it's time to get involved, folks. I really urge you to get registered to vote. More than voting, you also have to be involved every day with keeping informed about the issues, reading the sources that will keep you accurately informed, and read several different points of view so you can decide which is the best point of view from which to come when it comes to advocating policies that are best for the United States of America and our country, our home, our state of California, and other states in the union that are watching the show, and people in the world. We are all citizens of the world as well. We need to make sure that we help to create a peaceful world that's just, socially just, that focuses on economic development, and that does not allow for unjust wars to be started, unnecessary wars, and only have a defense that is truly a defense and not an offense. A lot to talk about next Wednesday when we'll pick up again on Wednesday evening, a week from now, 7 p.m. Don't forget the show starts at 7 o'clock, and we have a little bit of a discussion of issues and a presentation of them, and then we go for the call-ins from the audience. So please feel free to call in 7:15, and then we'll go till 8 o'clock with a discussion with the audience. Tell your friends they can call in as well. It's all about people taking part. Thank you so much, and good night. God bless.